There could be a long story, so we'll leave that out.
When your day is long and the night is young.
What are the most significant moments in your life?
I would say in chronological order, my achievement as a chartered accountant, most importantly, marrying Maria Grazia, my wife, my lovely wife, who in fact is more than that. She's really my best friend. She's my carer. She's my big support system. So that's very important for me. And thirdly, it would be my appointment as managing director of Checkers Group, supermarket group. That was in 1989. I was seconded by the holding company to take over the Checkers Group, which was in some financial difficulties. And within a few years, managed to restore it to profitability.
How was your life experience in Italy?
Well, okay, let me say this. I was born in Italy in 1943, a difficult period, as you can understand. But I left with my parents, left Italy in 1947. So I was 4.5 years old. So I really don't have a lot of experience as a youngster, as a baby. I do, however, have a lot of experience because I've been back to Italy many, many times, from the top to the bottom. And I have to say, notwithstanding my many, many travels, the one place that always pulls me is Italy.
What led you to South Africa?
It was a very difficult time during the war, just towards the end of the war. Jobs weren't easy to find. And my mother's father had immigrated to South Africa in 1901, 1902. And he was of Sicilian origin. I think we all know that many Sicilians at the turn of the century emigrated, many to the US of A, some to South America, and perhaps he was just one of those who decided to come here in Johannesburg. He was a stonemason, and very shortly after arriving set up a business of stonemasonry. He had since died, and my mother returned to Italy with her mom. But there was a connection in South Africa. Rather than go to maybe Brazil or Argentina, we came here because there was some connection.
Could you tell us about your journey to South Africa?
We flew. We took a train from Geneva to Rome. We flew, and the first stop was Cairo, Egypt. 1947, July. You had the problems with the Israeli wars and so on. And in fact, we were stuck in Egypt, in Cairo, for 3 weeks. So we were delayed quite a lot. But I do remember that particularly. And then from there, we got on board again and we landed, I think, in Mogadishu. I'm not sure. Then southern Rhodesia, where it may be. And then not Jan Smuts Airport, because there wasn't a Jan Smuts Airport. It was called Palmytfontein Airport, which has since become the Grand Germiston Airport. And that's where we landed, and then eventually took a train, and 2 days later we landed in Cape Town, where my grandmother was. It took a long time.
Could you tell us about your life in South Africa?
I remember distinctly the difficulties of being accepted within a community or whatever. Let me just go back a moment. We arrived here in Cape Town, but then my father joined us. He left Italy, and in 1948 he arrived here. And from here we went back to Johannesburg, because that's where my mother's father had established the stonemasonry. So we started going to school. We found a school, and this was where I found the difficulty in being accepted. We were those eye ties, and why aren't you dark? And those sort of things. And of course, also, we couldn't speak English too well. And that's why, by the way, from there on, my dad and mom said, right, we only speak English at home. We don't want any problems. We don't want people mocking you and laughing at you because you can't speak the language. Those are some of the things that I remember. Obviously being bullied quite a bit, but my older brother was extremely strong, and he just made sure that everything was sorted out. But more importantly, we got past all this bullying simply by me, from my side, always being the top scholar and therefore being seen as quite good. And my brother from his side being the top sportsman. And that's how we went through the school life. Then I joined the South African Army. In 1976, I was up in the border as a proxy for the USA. The USA was very concerned that with Portugal having left Africa, the Cubans were now moving into Angola. So we, as a South African Defence Force, moved in there. We helped Mr. Gerald Ford, President of the USA. Through my military career, I eventually became a major, and I was decorated with the MMM, which is the equivalent of the British DSM, Distinguished Service Medal, that's the same.
What do you think are the best qualities of Italy and of South Africa? And what are their differences?
Okay, just very briefly, the best qualities for me of Italy, besides its position and its climate and whatever, the mountains and the sea, the biggest qualities for me is the history, not just from Rome on, but the Etruscans, etc. And of course the treasures, the art treasures, and even the building treasures, the bridge treasures that you find in Italy. In South Africa, on the other hand, probably the most fantastic thing, and I'm excluding the climate, is the fact that the people, and I'm including everybody, I'm not just talking of the settlers from Europe, the people are very nice, they're very tolerant. Obviously, there are problems in any community, and unfortunately, politicians tend to exaggerate those problems. But if you take the people per se, they are extremely pleasant, very relaxed, and very tolerant of all. Whereas in Europe, you'll find pockets, and not only in Italy, in all of Europe, there are areas which you don't cross. In South Africa, everything's fine.
What does being Italian mean to you?
To be Italian, I think, and I'm sorry to say this, gives me a sense of superiority. I shouldn't be saying it. But I mean, the Italians have done and created and achieved so much. And I'm not only talking of the Romans, we'll go through Da Vinci, whoever you want. We can carry on and on, the operas and so on.
What does being an Italian living abroad mean to you?
Besides the few problems that I mentioned initially, where you have to eventually become accepted, it's quite interesting and quite exciting, because with all your interaction with friends and just acquaintances or colleagues, you're able to give of your past, of what you've gleaned from your Italian heritage. That might sound a little bit egoistic, but I find that people quite enjoy that, or maybe they're just being nice to me.
What are your biggest successes and your biggest regrets?
There are two or three very important things that come to mind. Number one would be joining or being part of the founding committee and becoming vice president of the first Italian newspaper in South Africa, La Voce. A second would be being a member of the founding committee of the Italian old age home in Johannesburg, Casa Serena. And another one would be, I think very importantly, again, a founding member and eventually chairman of the organization which was set up in South Africa to do the barcoding of products. Those are important steps, I think, in my particular life. I'm sure there's some other smaller things, but, that's the way life is. And I have no regrets. I cannot think of anything that is regretting.
If you could share a message or an advice with people younger than you, what would it be?
My advice to younger people would always be to try to identify the silver lining in every problem, because we're always faced with problems, whether it be physical or business-wise or money-wise. And so my advice is find the silver lining, find a positive side, and you'll get through it.
What does happiness mean to you?
For me, happiness is interaction with friends. And when I say friends, I'm including family. I'm not talking about a large number of friends or whatever, even just a small group. So for me, happiness is sharing emotions, sharing experiences, joys, sorrows, whatever, with close friends and family.
If you could describe your life in one word, what would it be?
positive.
What is your favorite song?
Now, here's something strange because it's a very sad song. It is called Everybody Hurts by REM. I could play it for you, but we can play it on the phone.
'Cause everybody hurts. Take comfort in your friends.